we played Hey Paula on the radio, and Mother was the first one to say, "Boy, that was really a good song. Where'd that come from?" And I said, "Well, Ray wrote it." And she said, she said, "Well, that's great." She said, "I think you ought to do something with that."
That'll sell 1 million copies, is her exact words.
Yeah, she did say that. And Mother knew that I loved to sing, and that was a love of mine. And Ray and I sounded pretty good together, so she and my dad put us in this car, and we drove up to Fort Worth, Texas, and didn't have a plan. We didn't have an appointment. Pardon me, I'm having trouble with my dry voice. But we lucked out, and we were kind of at the right place at the right time, and we got to record Hey Paula. And I had written a little song because we have to have a B-side, so they put that on the other side. And I remember getting a call. I was over at the house. My house was at 406 West Lee Street, and the guy who produced the record said, "You have a #1 record." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" So
#1, that's...
he said, "Well, you're #1. You've got the best record in the United States." So I said, "Yippee, I don't know what that means, but that's great," because we had gone back to college and we were just studying. And so I got in the car and ran over and found Ray. He was at the library, and I said,
Studying.
Studying.
Hey, you know that's a lie from the pits of hell, don't you?
So I said, "Ray, guess what? We just got a call and we have a #1 record." And he said, "What does that mean?"
What does that mean?
So that's it. And I had a great mama, let me tell you.
She was a great mama. I told some people about however long ago it was that when I came to Howard Payne, I needed a mama to slap me around. And she didn't slap me around, but Jill's mama was my mama too, a second mama, and so was Irene Nettleship, who I lived in a boarding house with, and they just were there for me, and taking care and putting up with my junk, and my lack of discipline, my lack of planning and everything else. But she literally came by and made me get in the car with her little daughter. 5'1", 6'3". I shouldn't have been with those short people. Got in the car and we drove to Fort Worth, unannounced, no appointment, no nothing. Talk about shooting in the dark. Got to this place, waited around for 6 or 7 hours in hopes that St. Nicholasson would be there. Because she had talked to a guy that knew a guy. Some of you might remember this guy. She had talked to a guy by the name, after her research, and because Riney said, "I think he got a hit," and Loris's antenna went up. And so she started calling around, and her research took her to a guy by the name of Smokey Montgomery, who played with the Light Crust Doughboys. You remember Smokey? Wonderful man. And Smokey was an in-studio recording guy for a fellow by the name of Major Bill Smith, who was a loud-talking meat salesman from Fort Worth, who had a hit song because the song that he had laid down some of his meat money from a young man out of McKinney, Texas, named Bruce McMeans, who was a football player, and they changed his name to Chanel, Bruce Chanel. And he had a song that's being played just about every football game in Texas and all over the country every Friday night, Hey Baby. And he'd had this hit record on this Hey Baby thing in 1962. And so in hopes that we could meet Mr. Smith, we drove up there that day and we waited, and they all came in. And if you'll take one of these, start to say bye, just take one of those books back here. The last chapter of the book says, "How many people does it take to make you famous?" And I look back and I see Loris Jackson right in the big middle of life. If it hadn't been for her, we wouldn't have driven to Fort Worth. And there was a black guy who was supposed to record that day, and he didn't show up. And we were standing there. Who would have thought it? And the guy asked us, "What do you have? What do you want?" he was watching his clock, and we said, she stepped forward, she said, Mr. Smith, this is Mama. Laura, she says, we have a hit record. A hit song, she said, for you. And she didn't know it, but she chose the right words, because it had been about a year since he'd had a hit, and he'd thrown a 7, and he wasn't getting any more 7s, you know. And so he said, well, what do you got? He grabbed this guitar from Smokey, and he said, play a little bit of it. Hey, he said, let's record it. We're going to record something today, if it's the Star-Spangled Banner, he said. We've got all these musicians sitting in here drinking beer and eating sandwiches, and the time is running out. So the guy didn't show. Laura's demanded that we go. I look back at all of that and I go, how come us? You know, we just could have been. One of the songs on one of our albums is called Average Boy, Average Girl. We like to sing, but we're no better singers than you guys. Some of you are not so good.
For more local news, pick up a copy of the Brownwood Bulletin or go online at brownwoodtx.com.